What would you do if the person who laughed at you the loudest suddenly went completely silent? Not because you said something back, but because a stranger dropped a champagne glass the moment they heard your name. That question right there is what this whole story is about. And I want you to stay with me through every single word of it, because this is not just a story about war or secrets or call signs. This is a story about what happens when a person spends 20 years making themselves invisible. And then one afternoon at a Texas barbecue, the world refuses to let them hide anymore. My name is Claire Donovan. I am 53 years old. I live alone outside Temple, Texas, in a small house with an old truck and a vegetable garden. My family thinks I'm quiet. Strange, maybe. The cousin who never really came back from the army. The one who shows up once every few years, hugs the right people, eats the food, and disappears again before anyone asks too many questions. I had not attended a family gathering in nearly 8 years before Aunt Donna called. She did not guilt me into it. She did not make it complicated. She just said, "Claire, I am getting old, sweetheart. I would really love to see you." That was all it took. 3 hours in the truck with peach cobbler in the passenger seat, and a quiet promise to myself that I would leave before sunset if things got too loud. They got loud. They always do when Rick is drinking before noon. My cousin Rick sells RVs outside Dallas. He is not a bad person, I want to be clear about that. He is just the kind of man who confuses volume with confidence and uses laughter as a weapon when he feels like someone might be more interesting than him. By the time I arrived at Aunt Donna's place, Rick had already worked through several imported beers and was holding court near the grill, making everyone laugh at things that were not quite as funny as he thought they were. He saw me walk in and immediately called across the patio. "Well, look who finally came back from Area 51. A few cousins laughed. I smiled. "You still alive, Rick?" "Barely," he said. "Inflation's trying to kill me." That got more laughter, and I slipped away to help carry trays from the kitchen. Nobody noticed. I preferred it that way. Hey, if you're already feeling this story, hit that subscribe button right now and ring the bell so you never miss what comes next. Stories like this one live here. Don't miss the next one. Around 4 p.m, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Out stepped an older man in a navy blazer despite the Texas heat. Tall, lean white hair cut military short. Even before Aunt Donna introduced him, I recognized the posture. Combat veterans carry themselves a certain way. It does not matter how many years have passed or how old they get. That way of standing never completely leaves the body. His name was Walter Briggs. He had served with Aunt Donna's late husband Harold years ago. Walter shook hands around the patio, working his way through the family, until his eyes landed on me. Something shifted in his expression for just a second. Recognition, then confusion, then something he quickly put away. I looked away first. I should have known right then that the afternoon was about to go sideways. By early evening, Rick had moved from being amusing to being a problem. He had gathered a small group near the cooler and was retelling his high school football days for what was probably the 4th or 5th time that year. I was sitting quietly near the railing, watching the sunlight settle across the fields beyond Aunt Donna's property, when Rick wandered over with a beer, and that particular grin men get when they want an audience. "So," he said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "you ever actually do anything dangerous in the army?" I shrugged. "Sometimes, what's that mean?" "It means sometimes," a few cousins chuckled. Rick grinned wider. "You shoot guns and all that? Fight anybody?" His tone had that testing edge to it. The kind men use when they are trying to make someone feel small and calling it humor. I could feel Walter watching from across the patio. Maybe I was tired. Maybe after 2 decades of making myself smaller than I actually was, something in me just got exhausted. Whatever the reason, I answered honestly. "Only hand to hand," I said calmly. Knives were optional. The group burst out laughing. Rick slapped the table. "Oh, come on." I smiled into my iced tea. Then he said it. "Let me guess. They called you Princess." I looked him directly in the eyes. "Hades." One word. That was all. And Walter Briggs dropped his champagne glass. The entire patio went silent. Not quiet, silent. The kind of silence that only happens when something deeply unexpected cracks the air wide open. Walter had gone pale. Not shocked pale, not surprised pale, haunted pale. The old SEAL stared at me like he was looking straight through 20 years of memories he had buried somewhere deep. "No damn way," he whispered. Rick blinked. "What?" Walter approached me slowly. "You were Task Unit 7, he said quietly. I said nothing. "You flew Kandahar extraction routes." Still nothing. Walter's breathing changed. My family looked back and forth between the two of us, completely lost. Rick forced out a laugh. "Okay, hold on. What is happening?" Walter ignored him. He looked at me the way soldiers look at graves. "I heard you were dead." The patio had gone perfectly still, except for the distant sound of cicadas buzzing in the trees. I set my glass down carefully. "Not dead," I said softly. Walter's eyes glistened slightly. Then he straightened his back, and in front of my entire family, my cousins, their kids, my aunt, everyone, that retired Navy SEAL saluted me, and for the first time in his life, Rick Donnelly stopped laughing. Nobody spoke for a long time after that. Walter eventually sat down across from me and started explaining to my family what my call sign meant and where it came from. I did not love every second of it. I never have been comfortable with attention, but something in me understood that this moment had been building for a long time, and there was no quiet way to step around it. Walter told them about the SEALs who owed me their lives, about Rangers and Marines and medics who had spoken my call sign like a prayer, about men who had been considered dead until something changed their situation. Rick sat very still through all of it. The mockery had completely drained out of his face. If this is hitting something real for you right now, do me one favor. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And make sure you like it so more people can find this story. It matters. You want to know why they called me Hades? Not because I was dangerous. Not because I was frightening. A SEAL said it first after a mission went bad, when the men who made it out were trying to describe what had happened. "No matter how deep into hell we got," he said, "she always came back for us. That is the whole answer. That is the name." I spent the drive home from Aunt Donna's party in a familiar kind of exhaustion. The kind that comes not from hard work, but from being seen when you have spent years practicing invisibility. There is nothing dramatic about it. It just settles into your chest like something heavy and quiet. I almost did not go to Kandahar. I want you to understand that. The mission was supposed to be routine extraction support, a small recon unit in and out before sunrise. I had run similar operations enough times that the fear had become something manageable, something I could tuck behind the work. Then the sandstorm hit early, and everything unraveled fast. Visibility collapsed within minutes. The sky turned that orange-black color that means the atmosphere itself is folding in on you. We lost communications twice. Then the recon team got ambushed moving toward the extraction point, and men started dying before anyone could react. 2 down immediately. Heavy gunfire, RPGs, the works. The command channel ordered all air units to withdraw. 1 pilot turned back. Then another. The storm was bad enough that turning back made tactical sense. I understood that. I still understand it. But over the radio, through the static, I could hear the SEAL team. I could hear what was happening to them. And they were still alive. That was the only calculation that mattered to me in that moment. I flew in. The landing was the hardest of my career. I could not see terrain. I could not see enemy movement. I could barely read my own instrument panel through the dust and the warning alarms screaming around me. Bullets tore through the left side of the aircraft before we even touched the ground. The SEAL team was already carrying their wounded when I came down. 1 man missing part of his leg, another barely conscious. We loaded everybody we could. Then another RPG hit nearby and the fire started. I know what burning hydraulic fluid smells like. I know what burning metal smells like. Some memories do not fade with age. They just get a little quieter, which is not the same as disappearing. We lifted off overloaded, half blind, in the middle of the storm with enemy vehicles closing in. A younger cousin at Aunt Donna's party whispered that it sounded like a movie. I shook my head immediately. Movies end clean. This did not. We made it out. Not everyone. That is the part that never quite settles. Afterward, the politics started. The commanding officer who had ordered the withdrawal had powerful connections and a career he was not willing to let reality damage. Someone needed to absorb the blame for the operation going wrong. They said I had acted recklessly, said I had violated withdrawal orders, said I had endangered military assets. They punished me for embarrassing someone important. Walter knew. He had carried the anger about it for almost as long as I had. But careers and institutions and carefully worded reports have a way of burying truth under enough paperwork that most people stop looking. My marriage fell apart. I could not sleep. Every helicopter sound sent my heart into my throat. I could not be around crowds. I could not explain to people who had not been there what was happening inside me. And after a while, I stopped trying. I became the strange cousin. The quiet one. The woman who disappeared. Like this video right now, if you've ever felt like you had to make yourself smaller to survive somewhere, you're not alone. And subscribe, because the stories we tell here are for people like you. Walter called me the morning after the barbecue and told me that Daniel Mercer, the officer who had buried the truth, was speaking at a veterans fundraiser in Austin the following evening. Retired general now, guest of honor. I almost did not go. I told Walter I was not looking for revenge. I had not been looking for anything in a long time except peace. He said, sometimes avoiding pain also means avoiding closure. I hated that he was right. I drove to Austin. The Veterans Memorial Center was full of luxury SUVs and American flags and warm chandelier lighting and waiters carrying shrimp cocktails. The kind of room where sacrifice gets honored comfortably. Mercer was exactly as I remembered him. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of confidence that fills a room before the man even speaks. He saw me the moment I walked in. His smile disappeared. For just 1 second, underneath all that polish, I saw fear. He crossed the room to speak with me, and the conversation was exactly what I expected. Polished, controlled, full of the same careful language that had buried the truth 20 years earlier. I had come this far, so I stayed for the speech. And then Mercer found me with his eyes from the podium and started talking about veterans who struggle to adjust after service, about trauma affecting judgment and memory and emotional stability. He was doing it again, right there on stage, in front of a room full of people who trusted him, using elegant language to rewrite history and make cowardice sound like leadership. Walter stood up. I was there, he said. His voice carried across the entire ballroom. That woman flew into a firestorm while you ran. The room went completely still. Then a man near the front slowly rose from a wheelchair. Older Marine, gray beard, missing his left leg. He looked at me with wet eyes. She saved my life. Then another veteran stood. Then another, a medic, a former ranger, an elderly father holding a folded military cap. One by one they spoke. She brought my son home. We were told nobody was coming. She carried the wounded herself. Mercer's posture cracked. Walter announced that the Kandahar files had been partially declassified. The ballroom had become something else entirely, something quieter and heavier than a fundraiser. And the Marine in the wheelchair raised a trembling hand to his forehead and saluted me. I sat there frozen while 20 years of buried truth rose into the room like smoke, and I realized I did not want revenge. I just wanted the truth to stop hiding. Share this video right now. Copy the link and send it to someone who has been carrying something they never talked about. Sometimes people just need to know they are not invisible. Like, subscribe, and share. It genuinely matters. 3 days later, Mercer called me personally. I almost did not answer, but curiosity and exhaustion have a way of making the same decision sometimes. We met at a small diner outside Georgetown. He looked terrible without the stage and the medals and the room full of people choosing to believe in him. He was just an old man who had spent 2 decades running from himself and was starting to feel how far he had run. He told me he had been afraid. That the storm hit and communications collapsed and he panicked. He said he had told himself the withdrawal was tactical. His voice was barely above a whisper. But the truth is, I was terrified. I looked at the man I had hated for 20 years, and he just looked tired. He asked me why I had never tried to destroy him. I sat with that question for a long moment before answering. Because hatred gets heavy, I said. You carry it long enough. Eventually it carries you. Pain does not disappear when someone admits they caused it. The lost years do not return. The nightmares do not vanish because an apology finally arrives. The panic attacks, the divorce, the isolation, none of that gets erased by a conversation in a diner off the highway. But the anger had already started fading before I even sat down across from him. I am not sure when it happened. Maybe it was the ballroom. Maybe it was Walter standing up. Maybe it was the Marine in the wheelchair. Maybe some of it was just time. I told Mercer that forgiveness is not a transaction. He nodded faintly. We sat in silence for a while. Two damaged people in a quiet diner, while a waitress refilled coffee cups and called everybody honey. A week after that, Walter brought me to a veteran support gathering in Colleen. Small room, folding chairs, bad coffee, older veterans doing their best to help younger ones stay afloat after coming home. I would normally have refused. Too many ghosts in one room. But something inside me had finally loosened a little. And when I arrived and saw a young veteran sitting near the wall staring at the floor exactly the way I used to after Afghanistan, I understood why I had come. Walter asked if I would share something. I stood up slowly. I told them that people hear military stories and assume the hardest part is combat. Some of them nodded before I even finished the sentence. I told them the hardest part is usually afterward, when you come home and everyone expects you to return to normal immediately. I told them I spent years believing isolation was strength, that shutting people out was how I protected myself, and that loneliness is sneaky, because after enough time it starts to feel comfortable, and you stop recognizing it for what it is. The gray-haired Army veteran asked why they called me Hades. I looked down at my hands before answering. The first team that gave me the name used it after a rescue mission went wrong. One of the SEALs said, "No matter how deep into hell we got, she always came back for us." Nobody spoke for a long time after that. Not because it was dramatic, because it was true. And older people in particular understand that the most meaningful moments usually arrive quietly, with no music and no explosion. Just truth landing softly inside a room. After the meeting ended, the quiet young veteran from near the wall came up to me by the coffee table. He looked nervous. "You really think people can come back from that stuff?" he asked. From the darkness, I studied him carefully. Then I answered the only honest way I knew how. "Not completely," I said. "But enough to live again?" His eyes watered slightly. He nodded once. And somehow that moment meant more to me than every medal I had ever received or every ceremony I had ever sat through. If this story moved something in you, like this video right now, subscribe for more stories like this one. And share it with somebody who needs to hear that surviving is not the same as disappearing. You've come this far. Stay with us. I drove home that evening alone beneath a deep orange Texas sunset with the windows down and warm air moving through the truck. For the first time in longer than I could clearly remember, the silence around me did not feel empty. It felt like something I had earned. I thought about all of them. Aunt Donna, who called and simply said she would love to see me. Rick, who showed up 3 days after the barbecue with peach turnovers in a paper bag because he did not know any other way to apologize. Walter, who carried his own anger for 20 years, and still had the energy to stand up in a ballroom full of people and say the thing that needed to be said. The Marine in the wheelchair. The mother who pressed a photograph into my hand in the lobby and whispered that her son talked about me before he died. Mercer, broken in a diner, finally out of places to hide. Life wounded all of us differently. Some people responded with arrogance, some with guilt, some with isolation. But underneath all of it, most people are simply trying to survive themselves. That is the most honest thing I know about human beings. People thought Hades meant death or violence or something frightening. They were wrong. It meant going into hell to bring people back, including yourself. And maybe that is true for more of us than we realize. Maybe some of us have been carrying pain silently for years because we genuinely believe nobody else would understand it. Maybe pride has kept families apart longer than anyone intended. Maybe forgiveness is not about excusing what happened or pretending the damage was not real. Maybe it is simply about refusing to let bitterness become the last and loudest thing about you. You are allowed to survive and still choose kindness. You are allowed to carry scars and still come back to the people who love you. You are allowed to be the strange quiet one at the family barbecue and still have lived a life so full and so hard and so honest that it makes a retired Navy SEAL drop a champagne glass the moment he hears your name, the strongest. People in any room are rarely the loudest ones. Sometimes they are just the ones who kept showing up when it would have been much easier not to. And sometimes, after 20 years of running, the most courageous thing left to do is simply stay. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who might need it today. It costs you nothing, and it might mean everything to them. See you in the next one.